Great. I see people coming in. Welcome, everybody. We'll give Zoom a minute here to catch up with everybody to get into the room, and then we'll get started. Welcome, everyone. We're just giving Zoom a minute here to get loaded up. And then we'll get going to all of our exciting lightning talks we have today. Okay, it looks like Zoom is loaded up. Great. Well, good afternoon, everybody. Good afternoon to potentially a really snowy afternoon if you're coming from the Southeast. It's super rare for us to get a snow day. That either means something really fun or something not so fun, depending on whether or not you're also dealing with kids at home. But anyway, good afternoon to a snowy afternoon. This is the Southeast Climate Adaptation Science Center Science Seminar Series. And our goal at these virtual gatherings is to provide a platform to highlight and discuss the research that supports resource management all across the Southeast. My name is Michelle Jewell, and I'm the Communications and Engagement Manager for the Southeast CASC. And I'm going to start with just a few meeting logistics. I'm going to request your feedback with a short poll, and then our speakers are going to take it from there. We'll have a nice Q&A at the end, and also at the end of the talks, we'll just kind of work that out as we go along. So first, some of the Zoom logistics. We are in a Zoom webinar format. We're also recording today's webinar, so we will be able to access it later on our YouTube channel this afternoon. You'll notice the chat box itself is disabled, but we do have the Q&A bar open. And I want to encourage you to put questions into that Q&A box as you have them. I've also encouraged our panelists here to go ahead and answer those questions as they have time to, and if they're comfortable with that in the Q&A too. So feel free to put your questions in the Q&A. Any questions that we don't get to during the talks, I will be asking them on your behalf at the end. We also have a brand new feature that I'd love to request your feedback on if you do end up using it, which is the translated captions feature for Zoom. This is a real-time caption translation service that allows you to select your preferred captions language in the webinar. So if you click on captions, switch the translation option to on, then you'll be able to select a preferred caption language. So especially for those of us who are Spanish speaking, I'd really love to know if this works out for you. We'd love your feedback to see if this is a great feature or not. So next, I'll ask Maeda if she will go ahead and launch our poll for us, and we can see where some of y'all are coming from, just so that can help us in our reports. Oh, let me get it out of the way. If you take a few minutes just to answer those two questions, it helps us know who's in the room with us today. All right, going once, going twice. Awesome. Thanks y'all very much for those answers. We appreciate it. Oh, there we go. Perfect. Just as we expect. Thank you. Great. Thanks so much for that. Now, normally this is where I introduce our speaker for today, but because we have so many wonderful speakers, I'm going to ask each of them to introduce themselves when they start their talk. So today we are listening to a selection of some of the newly funded research out of the Southeast CASC, and we'll be learning about their projects, who's involved with their projects, and some of the challenges or questions that they're looking to answer. So with that, I will stop sharing my screen. And I will invite our first presenter to go ahead and take it from there.
Great, that would be me. I am the first presenter, and hopefully everyone can see my slides okay.
Perfect.
Let me know if you can't hear me okay. My name is Rebecca Irwin. Please call me Becky, and I am a professor at North Carolina State University, and I'm also the consortium director on the university side for the Southeast Climate Adaptation Science Center. So we very much appreciate everyone coming today. We really appreciate you. And so the project I'm going to talk about today is a new project that the center is working on that's doing a synthesis of climate adaptation science and practice in the Southeast. So what I'm going to do today is just give you a background for what the goals of the project are, a background more generally on the project, and then where we are within our framework of working. Okay, so first of all, who's involved? I have two co-investigators on this project that I want to call out, Carrie Furness, who's also the Assistant Consortium Director, and Nils Peterson, who is a faculty member at NC State and who's also a PI on our host award for the SE CASC. And in addition, I want to call out the fact that we are hoping that many partners in the Southeast are going to get involved in a synthesis. First of all, by letting us know what information they're interested in having synthesized. And second, by participating in convenings where we can gather feedback. And I also want to specifically call out on the USGS side, Jennifer Cartwright, Hailey, Shanovich, and the other Catherine Smith, who are involved in this project, as well as we always appreciate Paul Armsworth's feedback and ideas, because he has many great ones. So the goals of this project are threefold. First of all, we are going to conduct a synthesis of the state of climate adaptation science and practice in the Southeast. So this is going to involve both formal literature review, review of other non-peer reviewed items that are on the web or that sit with our partners. Second, we're going to improve visualization and the use of existing climate adaptation information. And part of that is going to be based on the synthesis that we conduct and what information needs better visualization tools. And then finally, we're going to use those first 2 points to highlight gaps in knowledge and to use our interim science priorities to launch new working groups or communities of practice that will benefit climate adaptation science in our region. So with those goals in mind, as background, I think as many of you know, the Southeast and US Caribbean are biodiversity hotspots. We host much of the native, or we have many native species and many endemic and threatened species in our region. But our region also suffers from a significant imperilment, whether you measure that imperilment as land use change, changes in extreme events, urbanization, invasive species, and all of those regional environmental changes become exacerbated by the consequences of climate variation, climate extremes, and climate warming. So for the last 14 years, so the SE CASC started in 2010. For the last 14 years, we've been working with regional partners to deliver science to inform climate adaptation. And so as you might imagine, we kind of feel like we're on a treadmill trying to provide this science. And now this is a good time after those 14 years to reflect on what we've done and have a chance to synthesize both the science that the SE CASC has done, but also work from our very wonderful partners in the Southeast to get a sense of where we are at in terms of planning and implementation of climate adaptation actions. So the framework or process and workflow that we're going to use for this synthesis is as follows. First of all, we did not come into this synthesis saying this is exactly what we're going to do. Instead, what we're going to try and do is use a co-production process to develop a blueprint for the synthesis. So we're going to convenings where our partners go to facilitate discussions and to understand needs. That's where we're at in our process right now. From there, we'll do a resource analysis and collate and review resources to then determine the elements for evaluation. From there, we'll do deep dives of case studies and an actual synthesis that will then result in a visualization that we hope will be useful for partners. Throughout this process, we are going to have multiple convenings, and we are going to go to convenings to gain feedback throughout and to gain perspective. So, as I said, we're kind of right at the beginning here. So, this project started in August and September. And so, where have we gone and what have we done? Many of us at the SE CASC went to SIAFWA that was hosted in August, or gosh, in December in Augusta, Georgia, to gather feedback. We work closely with Hailey, who you're going to hear about in a moment for another project. But she works closely with our state partners, especially on state wildlife action plans. And so she is a great liaison where we can get and address state partner needs. And then also, thanks to Steph Courtney, she is our assistant tribal climate liaison, and she works with USET and is funded by BIA to get tribal needs and priorities. In addition, what we've been doing is also interacting with our other regional CASCs. So there are 9 other regional CASCs who also have conducted syntheses relevant to their region. And so we're trying to do some shared learning to understand what they are doing, what has worked well, and then what has worked poorly, and then build out from there. So based on all of that information that we have so far, 2 topics have really bubbled up. These are topics that we have heard before, and they bubbled up again, especially based on conversations that CCASC staff and had with partners at SIAFWA. And so in particular, it seems that there's a lot of interest in developing a menu of climate adaptation actions that are relevant for the Southeast and US Caribbean, and to more formalize other types of menus and adapt them to our region. Second, there's a lot of interest in mapping of on-the-ground implemented climate adaptation actions. So those are 2 initial topics that have bubbled up, and we're going to do more convenings to gather more information. But as a way to start moving out on this project, we're going to focus initially, we think, on a menu. And our plan as of right now, and we'd love feedback from anyone who's in the audience, either now or later, is there was a really nice menu developed by the Midwest CASC. And there's 2 papers that resulted that are in the published literature as well as relevant websites. And so our plan is to build off of those 2 additional studies and the Midwest adaptation menu and really adapt it to our region. That will involve a structured and some review of climate adaptation literature that's relevant for our region. It will involve multi-sector partner workshops, deep dives on menu topics based on interests that were highlighted in the workshops, and subsequent tool development. Depending on how long it takes us to do this component of the project, we hope we can then tackle potential mapping of implemented actions across our region by all of our various partners, as well as other topics that are highlighted by all of you. At this point, we are in the process of hiring a postdoctoral scholar to help with the synthetic review and the convening workshops. I was hoping at this meeting or at this webinar, I would have the ad that I could flash up and tell you to let your potential finishing students or other colleagues know about this postdoctoral opportunity, but it has not made it through HR yet. We're working very hard to have that happen quickly. But once that does, we will send it out to our various listservs, and we hope you encourage interested people to apply. And we are continuing to gather community feedback on needs to further shape the synthesis. So with that, I'll end there. If anyone has any questions, I'm happy to take them in the chat or in the Q&A. And I've put up contact information for myself, Carrie Furness, and Nils Peterson, but don't hesitate to reach out at any time. And if Carrie and Nils are in the audience today, they can help address questions too. Thank you very much.
Great. Thanks very much, Becky. There's some questions coming into the Q&A, and yeah, I'll also encourage Carrie and Nils. You can reply to those questions as well. Wonderful. Thanks, Becky. Our next speaker is Carla's team. Carla, take it away.
Hold on a second.
No problem. We can see everything.
Yes, but it's not in presentation mode, right? It
Yeah.
wasn't.
It wasn't.
Huh. No, cannot be this way.
Perfect.
Okay, good afternoon, everyone. I'm Carla Restrepo. I work at the University of Puerto Rico. I'm a professor here in the Department of Biology, and I'm going to talk to you a little bit about our ideas proposal, which is about invasive vines host interactions along a broad environmental gradient. And I want to acknowledge the other PIs of the proposal, which are Mona Papes, who's attending the webinar, Elena Rubio, and Luke Flory. And I also want to acknowledge now that we have a collaborating postdoc, which is Sakmin, who works with Luke Flory, which will be great to have him helping through the next year and a half. 2 undergrad students that helped us last semester when we started this project, Isabel Ortiz y Mariela Pereira, and 1 master's students in my lab that helped last semester, Anna Kilgore. So I want to motivate this short talk with this figure here that we prepared in my lab several years ago, where we were showing in different parts of the world vine species that were invasive. And I always ask myself if we're not seeing or listening to the signals that these plants are providing to us everywhere around the world. And coming from Puerto Rico, I have 3 examples of 3 different species. I have one from the Southeast. And over the years, I always kept thinking about perhaps a project that could bring together Puerto Rico, which you can barely see in this figure, and the Southeast part of the United States, because both are considered hotspots of invasive vines. And so the interest in this area, as I mentioned to you, is that it's a hotspot of invasive vines, and that it represents a broad environmental gradient that might help us understand what will happen with the spread of this species under ongoing and future climate change and other drivers of change that are affecting this region. So I think it was an ideal region to perhaps ask these broader questions about invasive species, focusing on invasive vines. And it's surprising because these are 4 examples of invasive vines. On the left in Puerto Rico, on the second and last one from Florida, and the third one, I think it's from Tennessee. People talk about them. They appear in the great literature. Some papers are published on them, but they're everywhere and nowhere at the same time, because I haven't been able to see a single piece of work that focuses on the entire region and takes a broad approach, a landscape level approach, a regional approach to understand what is happening with these species. And briefly, vines represent a group of herbaceous plants. They're different from lianas, which are woody climbing plants. These are herbaceous climbing plants that use other plants for support. And in this regard, they are known as structural parasites. So they need other plants. They can be even grasses, shrubs, or trees to climb to reach out for light and of course, conduct for photosynthesis. Although all these species, because there are many different species, have a climbing habit, they are very diverse, both in terms of the taxonomy and in terms of the traits that they have. So yes, they share a climbing habit, but that can vary depending on the organ that they use. And also they are very diverse in terms of other traits and in terms of their diversity. And so right now, it's becoming clear that invasive vines have a lot of impacts on natural and human-dominated landscapes, including effects on species distributions, because they end up killing the trees or shrubs that they're using as support. They can also have a strong impact on species interactions because they may become the food of insects, for example, as we saw as it's happening in South Africa. They definitely influence community composition from local to regional scales. They affect ecosystem functions because they can change carbon storage by killing the vegetation, for example, or they can change even the characteristics of the soil. If you were talking about invasive vines that are nitrogen fixers, and they can definitely affect landscape structure. And on the figure that I'm showing here is the mapping of invasive vines in a region in Puerto Rico that have been studying. And the yellow represents vine patches that you can actually detect using remote sensing data. And the drivers behind the spread of invasive vines include climate change, include invasive species, because many vines have been introduced because in the past they were useful to control soil erosion, because they're useful in agriculture, they were useful to feed cattle, among other things. Deforestation might be an important driver, and one that we're exploring in depth is land abandonment. As land is being abandoned because agriculture is not feasible economic activity in many parts, vines are taking over many of these regions. So we propose 3 aims for this proposal. One, because we think that this is a landscape, a regional problem, we propose to integrate species distribution models and remote sensing, especially hyperspectral data, to evaluate the contribution of biotic variables and provide estimates of invasive vine spread. So the idea is to use remote sensing perhaps to better characterize the hosts and even the species that conform these big patches of vines and improve the prediction of species distribution models. Our second aim was to incorporate a social dimension to prove our understanding of vine and human interactions. And definitely, as I will show you in a second, humans are an important driver of vine spread through land abandonment, or the way they're managing invasive vines in many parts. And finally, the third aim was to foster regional interactions and collaborations around shared histories and a shared problem. And so here I'm showing how these different components are tied together. And one important activity that we propose in this proposal was what we called the Invasive Vines Winter Institute, the first one of which we had or held here in San Juan, Puerto Rico in December. And the idea with this Invasive Vines Winter Institute was to bring together different participants, both from the mainland and from Puerto Rico, and ideally from the US Virgin Islands, to first develop a common language, a common goal, and then introduce participants to different tools that we could use to study the spread of invasive vines in this region, and incorporate a social dimension to improve how vines are expanding. So because this Invasive Vines Winter Institute is central to this proposal, I'm going to tell you a little bit of what happened during the week of December 7th to the 14th. So thanks to the help of Maria and Carrie and Michelle, we were able to put out an announcement that helped us recruit 13 students, 12 students, I think it was the total number of students, to visit here Puerto Rico and have a very intense week of many different activities. The activities, this was done over 6 days. During day 1, we tried to develop a vision, develop a common language. During day 2 and 4, we taught different tools, including remote sensing, including species distribution models, including ways to interview people and develop relationships with different stakeholders. And then during days 5 and 6, we developed projects. And the way we developed this itinerary was to mix activities with meal socialization and discussions, lectures and seminars, and workshops. And down on the right is an example of the agenda of the Sunday, which was pretty busy from 8:30 to almost 7:30, 6:30. And it was the way we initiated this seminar, this institute. So briefly, during the Winter Institute, we were able to begin using hyperspectral data. This is on the left side. It's just a small region here in Puerto Rico where we extracted 3 different what we call traits to start understanding or differentiating vine species or areas invited by vine species. So on the RGB, SRT40, and DUI, which is a long name, basically we're combining 3 different traits, and we want to try to use this hyperspectral data to map vine patches and also understand the host that they're using. Previous to this work, the undergraduate students compiled a list of all vines for the United States, Puerto Rico, and the US Virgin Islands. They were able to also combine lists of vine species that were non-native and or invasive and or noxious. And they use what is called the Taxonomic Name Resolution Service to homogenize the names across the different sources of information that we found. And this list is going to became and will continue to be very important in the process of generating species distribution models. So which I'm showing on the right, we are showing 2 species distribution models for 2 vine species that were worked by the students while they were here and during the institute. Then our second goal was to incorporate a social dimension to improve our understanding of vine-human interactions. And during the Winter Institute, we developed an amazing number of activities around this point. First, on the left, we had a panel where we invited institutions, government and private institutions from Puerto Rico and federal government institutions, obviously representing federal institutions from the US. In total, there were 5 persons that attended this panel that lasted for 1 hour and a half. And the panelists were provided with a script, a number of questions that they had to present, for which they had to provide some information during the panel. And they also contributed pictures to see whether for them there was a problem with these invasive vines, at least here in Puerto Rico. So it was very interesting and enriching. The second activity that we developed was a field trip, which is shown on the map on the lower right of the slide. And it's showing the route that we followed during the 3rd day of the Winter Institute. And during that field trip, we stopped at 4 different places. We had visited previously farmers or stakeholders to which we were going to ask a series of questions that we also prepared during the semester to get a feeling of about whether vines were invasive or not, and what were the problems that they were having, and what were their impacts that they were having. So up on the right side of the figure, there's a picture showing some of the students interviewing one of the stakeholders, the individuals, the farmers. And it was an activity that, to our surprise, engaged tremendously the different participants. And currently, we were able to run 4 interviews, and currently the interviews are being transcribed by 2 of the participants of the Institute. And finally, the third goal was to foster regional interactions and collaborations around shared histories and a shared problem. And I think all members, the attendees evaluated the Institute, and the evaluations were really good. And all members expressed an interest to contribute a variable number of hours during the academic semester to work on a manuscript, continue developing the SDMs, and work on the remote sensing part of their project. So I think that overall we began to move in a good direction, and I want to acknowledge a number of persons here. Lydia Olander, who was the first person that put me, at least me, in touch with the Southeast CASC Center. Then during the Southeast CASC Consortium meeting, I met Paul Armsworth and Elena Rubio. Elena is participating in this proposal as one of the PIs, and Paul put me in touch with Mona, and Mona accepted to become a PI of this proposal. And then Luke Flory, that I contacted him, and he said yes, that he was interested in participating. So thanks to all of them. And finally, thanks to Carrie, Michelle, and Maida, who have been instrumental answering a lot of questions and helping with putting out the announcements. And Carlos Pereira, who has been the administrator of the project here, who did a lot of work to make travel for 15 or 16 people feasible. So thanks, and if you have any question, I'll be more than happy to answer them.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Carla and team. It's lovely to hear about it. And there are some questions and discussion in the Q&A, so I'll encourage that team to take a look at that Q&A box and see what you can address in there. Moving steadily along, our next speaker, Hailey. Hailey, take it away.
All right, can you see my slides okay?
Perfect.
Awesome. Thank you. Thanks, Michelle, for having me. And my name is Hailey Shanovich, and I am a climate adaptation support scientist with the Southeast CASC, and I'm excited to tell you all about a new project today. So this project is titled A Coordinated Effort for Evaluation of Insect Pollinators Climate Change Vulnerability in the Southeast and U.S. Caribbean. And so I wanted to start with some background on this. So in general, insect pollinators and other insects, though the largest and most diverse animal group, remain highly understudied regarding their natural history, conservation status, and vulnerability to climate change, despite their immense ecological services. And especially in the Southeastern United States, where we have this very large diversity of endemic native flowering plants, there's been disproportionate efforts elsewhere in the country put towards monitoring, evaluation of our insect pollinators. And so the little research that has been done on impacts to Southeastern pollinators has found negative impacts. And so we want to continue this effort. And also the project was conceived kind of by our stakeholders and partners, like Becky was saying in her talk, that I work a lot directly with state and wildlife, or state and territory wildlife agencies in the Southeast and tribal resource agencies. And one of the main things I've been hearing this past year, I've been working to help incorporate climate change into state wildlife action plan revisions, is that wildlife and resource managers in the region want to incorporate pollinators and other insects into these management plans, but don't know where to start. There's just not a lot synthesized for pollinators in our region for them to be able to incorporate that into actual planning and conservation actions. And so the overall workflow or objectives for this project, are to first, it's more so a synthesis effort. Basically, we're going to be pulling, we have created a list of native pollinator species for the Southeast with the help of experts in the region, including the USGS Native Bee Lab. And so now we're going to work to synthesize these species distribution data, their host plants, any natural history info from the literature we can find for our specialist insect species in the Southeast. Then after that, we will conduct conservation status and climate change vulnerability assessments for these species with the help of taxa experts in the region. Then we will review these assessments collectively and vote on final rankings with our partners who are part of our advisory committee. And then we will create and disseminate a practitioner guide. And that's what this figure is kind of showing, these different ecoregions of the Southeast. And the idea is to maybe organize this guide by ecoregion so it's easy to implement on the ground depending what habitat a practitioner is working in. And so the overall workflow for this project looks like this. Right now, we have been assembling an advisory committee that is comprised of Southeast state, territory, and tribal partners. And they are going to provide input on which species we will be including in this assessment. And then also later on providing input or guiding the development of that end user product or the guide. We also shortly will be convening a technical team who will be actually doing these assessments. So we have that basically are going to reach out to taxa experts in the region, and then they will do these preliminary assessments, and then we're all going to come together next year and vote on these assessments together and make sure they make sense for each of the different subregions. And then by 2026, we're hoping to create and publish that practitioner guide. And so just bringing this figure up again to show you the different ecoregions, but I also want to call out that assessments, conservation status assessments, and vulnerability assessments have not been done for any of the US Caribbean species before. And so we're excited to convene and work with taxa experts from Puerto Rico and the Virgin Islands to conduct these for the first time. And that's all I have for you today. My co-PI is Becky, who gave a talk earlier today. And then these are the rest of our co-PIs on the project and our emails if you want to follow up with us and ask any questions. So thank you very much.
Hailey, thank you very, very much. And you have an offer to get a swap list in the chat, so you might check out the Q&A real quick.
Sounds good. Thank you.
Thanks, y'all. All right, next along, EM and Marcel, please take it away.
Thank you. Are we seeing presenter mode, hopefully?
Yeah, perfect.
Wonderful. My name is M. Dean, and I am a fish biologist with the United States Geological Survey. I'd like to acknowledge my collaborator, Marcel Bozes of the Miccosukee Tribe of Indians of Florida, as well as my co-PI, Wes Daniel, who's also a fish biologist at the USGS. Today, I'll be giving a project overview of assessing habitat suitability for invasive freshwater fish under a changing climate in the Southeast United States. And this information is intended to aid Florida Indigenous and state managers in conserving resilient freshwater ecosystems. And I'd also like to thank the Southeast CASC for their support of our project. We heard a little bit about invasive species already, but I'd like to really emphasize just how costly invasive species management is, almost as costly as natural hazards and are burdens of primary economic sectors, according to two very recent papers. In the United States and in the Southeast in particular, Florida is a hotspot of species invasions due to its peninsular nature, many ports of entry, as well as warm and wet climate. I really like this figure on the bottom right here because it shows that high non-native taxa richness. You can see there's over 100 species that are within these areas just around urban ports and things of that nature. There are many non-native taxa to worry about in Florida, and some of them are invasive fish species. Many of them are tropical and subtropical floodplain species that are very tolerant to environmental degradation. I'm showing only a couple here. There are many others. These are some cichlids and catfishes. We expect with changes in climate, like increases in air temperature and shifts in precipitation seasonality, like wetter wet seasons and drier dry seasons, for there to be greater habitat suitability for these species. So when we think about all the waterways that are in Florida, especially in southern Florida, we expect a northward expansion, a northward threat of these species, and that could potentially threaten other states as well. We can quantify habitat suitability using species distribution models. And not to get into too much technicality here, those simply take environmental data paired with species records in a model that generates a habitat suitability map that can be used for management decision-making. Field surveys can be used to help validate those models. However, those are seldom done. And that is what we are going to try to accomplish in our project. So I do have 2 projects I'll be presenting on, which we're very excited about. But the first project is thinking about habitat suitability of invasive fish species in Florida. So our first objective was determining, well, what are those priority non-native species? And we've accomplished that with the Miccosukee Tribe of Indians of Florida, as well as the Florida Fish and Wildlife Conservation Commission. Our next step was to model habitat suitability using max-N under current and future climate. And on the right, I'm showing a preliminary map of the African jewelfish under a climate scenario, its potential suitability. Our next step would be to take this map and actually sample for those fishes in lakes, rivers, and wetlands, and then validate those models using that field data. So we have a secondary project that came out of discussions from our first project, and that is more focused on the Everglades, which is infiltrated by non-native fish species, which impacts tribal resources. So in our work with Marcel, we've been inventorying non-native fishes and their habitat. And so you can see the study region here, that star, that's Water Conservation Area 3A, where the Miccosukee Tribe of Indians of Florida's reservation is located. So we're really drilling down into this area, and you can see some pictures of us already doing the research together. We have determined sample sites that are very widely distributed. They're about 10 miles apart. We're really going across this entire area trying to find these fishes using a variety of techniques and looking into a variety of habitat conditions that they could be using. We're going to examine local fish habitat relationships and then use this field data to help validate those suitability models. And with that quick project lightning talk, I want to thank everybody for being here and for listening to our talk. And if there's any questions, I'm more than happy to answer them now or through email.
Wonderful. Thanks, Marcel. And keep an eye out on that Q&A box too to see if any questions pop up in there.
Thank you.
Great, thanks. Moving steadily along, Kristen, representing the Catherine Smith team, feel free to take it away.
I think it's actually Catherine who's going to be speaking. I'll be.
Sorry, everybody. I was trying to click too many buttons at once. Yes, Catherine Smith. We're all, 3 of us will be speaking today, but I'm going to start off. My name is Catherine Smith. I am a research ecologist at the USGS St. Petersburg Coastal Marine Science Center. I also want to acknowledge my co-PIs on this project, Kristen Bird, who is a research physical scientist at the Western Geographic Research Center. Davina Passeri is a research oceanographer, and she's co-located with me in St. Pete. And J.R. Mehta, who is an archaeologist and professor at Florida State University. So I'm going to present on our project titled Triage and Decision Support Tool for Evaluating Vulnerability of Indigenous Shell Middens and the Loss of Marsh Habitat Diversity to Sea Level Rise. So the overarching problem is that Native American shell middens are important natural heritage and archaeological resources. They provide a critical record of our nation's first peoples, their traditions, and their way of life. They also preserve a paleohistory of our Earth's past geology, climate, environment, and human-environment interactions. They're also a significant or of significance to our contemporary Native Americans and serve as a connection to their ancestors and ancestral lands. Unfortunately, many of these sites are located on or very close to our present-day shorelines and are also within coastal marsh and are at risk to erosion, inundation, and submergence from storms and sea level rise. So the objectives of this project are to form an advisory team of ancestral tribes, state archaeologists, and land managers that will be involved in developing the creation of a tool to identify the cultural sites' vulnerability to coastal erosion and submergence. This is important because the current USGS data sets on coastal hazards are often in disparate formats and can be difficult to use or interpret by stakeholders, particularly for tribal archaeologists who may not have a background in coastal ecosystems, but have an interest in site integrity. So here you can see a list of the current advisory council members. They represent ancestral tribes and managers from 2 sites that we have selected as pilot sites. So those 2 sites are located in the northern Gulf of Mexico, the Grand Bay National Estuarine Research Reserve in Mississippi, and the Apalachicola National Estuarine Research Reserve in Florida. Kristen, you want to go ahead?
Sure. Yeah, thanks. Yeah, so I'm Kristen Bird. I'm on the project, and I'm also on our task working with Winston Cheng. He's a Pathways intern who's actually been doing a lot of the work. So for our task, we're building off of a recent project that Winston just completed. He developed a Python tool with a graphical user interface. It's called Rush. It's called Rapid Remote Sensing Updates of Land Cover for Storm and Hurricane Forecasts. And so it uses planet satellite data and a machine learning classification model to generate and deliver these high resolution maps of coastal vegetation, showing really almost near real-time conditions. And so we're using planet satellite data. This is a commercial satellite that provides 3-meter resolution multispectral imagery, and it's available almost daily for every place on the globe. And it's available for free for federal scientists through a NASA agreement, and also available to students for free. So the remote sensing model that Winston developed is very accurate, and it was developed for project areas within 3 different states: North Carolina, Louisiana, and Florida. So it overlaps fairly closely with the 2 study areas that we have for our project. So for our project, we're going to adapt the Rush tool to produce an historical time series of these more high resolution coastal maps to show the shoreline and marsh boundaries and inundation. And it's going to, again, be done for the 2 study areas. And the maps will also be attributed with tide gauge data, so we can understand the water height levels at the times images were taken. And the maps are going to be used as input to models that Davina will be running to help understand shoreline erosion and marsh loss. And you can move on.
Great, thanks.
All right, thanks. So in order to determine the shell midden vulnerability to changes in the landscape, we're going to be using both observed and modeled data. So the image on the left here is showing observations of historic shoreline erosion rates at Grand Bay over the past 60 years. So cooler colors here indicate areas that have higher erosion. And then the animation on the right here is showing model predictions of marsh productivity under sea level rise. So the animation will go through time to the year 2100 and increase sea level along the way. Green indicates high marsh growth, red is low marsh growth, and blue is open water. And so what you'll notice as sea levels rise, we see a decrease in marsh productivity. The marsh tries to migrate to higher upland areas, but eventually sea levels become too high and the marsh drowns out and gets converted to open water. So together, this data will help us to understand both the current and future risk of shell midden sites to erosion.
Thank you. So I am going to speak for JR. Unfortunately, he is dealing with record snow in North Florida and school closures and such. So JR Mehta is going to be leading a field assessment of these sites. So the approach will be to identify priority sites for field site documentation. The selection of these sites will be based on valuable input from the advisory council. And it will focus on areas that are most at risk due to inundation and shoreline erosion, which will be formed by some of these large scale data sets. And it will leverage remote sensing technology. We can analyze the rates of loss at a higher temporal resolution at these sites. Additionally, plan to use NDVI and vegetation models to assess changes in biodiversity, which are crucial indicators of ecosystem health. And through these field surveys, they will also include pedestrian surveys, pedestrian assessments, which is just walking and surveying the site. If approved by the advisory council, they may include some subsurface investigations or sampling, but all field plans and protocols will be evaluated and approved by the tribes that are participating in our advisory council, and the local management partners who are participating as well. These methods will ensure a comprehensive evaluation and allow documentation of sites before they are potentially lost. And lastly, JR Meta is also organizing an archaeological and environmental field school at Florida State University. This program will provide students with hands-on experience in both archaeology and environmental science, and will foster a unique interdisciplinary approach. The students will engage in fieldwork where they will learn archaeological and environmental monitoring techniques, while exploring the intricate relationship between the past human activities and environmental changes that we see today. Through practical training in site documentation and data collection, the students will develop essential skills in critical analysis and preservation methods. Ultimately, the field school aims to cultivate a deeper appreciation for our cultural heritage and the environmental contexts that shape our understanding of history. The course will be free to Indigenous students. They'll be provided a stipend, both a scholarship and stipend and travel assistance. And I think that's it. So just a list of some of our accomplishments and activities that we've already performed or that are underway. And if there's any other questions, we'd be happy to answer them. Thank you.
Great. Thanks, Catherine. Wonderful. Okay, so we have all of our speakers here. We have about 5-ish or so minutes to answer any questions. I'll encourage you to feel free to continue to put them in the Q&A. Davina, I will call it. You have a request in there. Oh, if Davina's still on. Yep, I see Davina there. Feel free to put those questions in the Q&A. You also, sorry, I'm freezing up a little bit. You also have the opportunity to raise your hand to ask your question out loud as well if you'd like to, and I can unmute you. Or go ahead and throw that question in the Q&A, and I can ask that one out loud. Wonderful. Great. Oh, and I see Mark has a question here. Let me go ahead and allow Mark to unmute himself.
There we go.
There you go, Mark. You should unmute yourself.
I've done with my volunteers over the years is if they're going out mapping, looking around, if you see a serious invasive that just started, just one specimen, just remove it now. It's called early detection, rapid response. It's a very practical thing to use.
Awesome. Thanks, Mark. Appreciate the comment. Any other questions? And I see a few more comments in the Q&A here about projections. That's one of the things I love about these meetings. Everybody has such great ideas. We get to share them together here in the webinar format. So thank you all for that. Well, I will go ahead and give us a little bit of time back on our busy and potentially very snowy days by once again thanking our presenters today. We appreciate your time and what's a really busy time of year. Thanks for being able to share some of your research and what your plans are for the future. We are so excited to touch base again and see how things are shaping up for you. To go ahead and selflessly promote us, our next science seminar in February is on Wednesday, the 19th. It's at 1 o'clock. It's also on Zoom. We'll be talking all about HABs, science needs related to harmful algal blooms and climate change. We have an all-star cast of characters here to talk about their work, and Tom Bile, Champagne Cunningham, and Devin Moore. So the link is going to be going into the chat soon if it isn't already, to feel free and go ahead and register for that. Or you can also scan that QR code and it'll take you straight to the registration too. And lastly, we post all of our events and seminars into our monthly newsletter. That link is also in the chat now. If you'd like to click on it and get all of this news in your inbox, you don't have to wait for the webinar. Feel free to go ahead and do that now. Otherwise, folks, thanks again for sharing your afternoon with us. We appreciate your time, and we'll see you on the next webinar. Thanks a lot. Have a great day.